Hey, we're diving in today. We're talking about conflict because who doesn't have conflict, right? We've been talking about habits for healthy families, and week one we kind of talked about how families go together, and they go together in worship, in prayer, in service, and different kinds of things. Last week we talked about first things first, and the families that are strongest and healthiest are those that have Jesus at the center. This week, fighting fair. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about how to handle conflict in a healthy way. And it's interesting, somebody talked to me this morning about, boy, I don't know if I'm ready for this message. And honestly, I don't know if I'm ready for this message, okay? Because, I'm the pastor, but I'm preaching to myself. So please understand, I'm just the mouthpiece this morning. I have things to learn and to grow into. And, as I've been reading my devotions, it's just evident that, conflict is a part of families. I, was reading about David and Absalom this morning and the Old Testament and all that was going on there. And, it was like a giant soap opera. But reality is, if you're in a group of people and they're close, you're in a family, you're going to have conflict. It's just a reality. All families have conflicts. All right, but the good news is we don't have to look at conflict as something bad. It doesn't have to just be a bad thing. In fact, conflict can actually serve us well, families well, when it's handled in the right way. If we work through it in the right way. Because as a friend of mine, a Christian family counselor, once said to me years ago, and I'll never forget, conflict is always an opportunity for growth. You'll find that to be true in your work relationships. You'll find that to be true on your athletic teams and the different groups that you belong to. You'll also find it to be true in your family. Conflict's always an opportunity for growth. Growing up, I know I experienced lots of conflict. I love my family, but I had a sibling, a sister, and we had conflict at times. We had to work through it. If you don't believe me, my mother's here this morning. You can ask her after service, and she can attest to it, all right? I don't think it was that bad, but there were some pretty good spats that we've had over the years. I remember I got clocked upside the head one time. That's not a healthy way to handle conflict, but full disclosure, I deserved every bit of it, okay? I kind of bought into that one. But I remember one time particular, she came to me about something serious. I was dating a girl, and she had some concerns. She knew about some things that were going on behind the scenes that I didn't know about, that I was just in ignorance of. And she came to me with these concerns and says, Tim, I have some concerns about this girl that you're smitten with, this girl that you're dating. And I just blew her off and was like, you know what? I don't care. It doesn't matter. A couple weeks later, my youth pastor comes to me. Tim, I'm seeing some things. I'm really concerned. And I said, I know what I'm doing. It's okay, right? And then my father comes to me and he says, Tim, I've got some real concerns. And I said, look, Dad, I'm 16 years old, right? It's okay. Because like every 16-year-old, I know everything, right? Everything is okay. And long story short, there was conflict because there was this unresolved issue between my sister and my dad. I'm assuming my mom as well, even though I didn't hear much from her. And my sister, my youth pastor, for sure. There's kind of this rift, this tension in the relationship. And even with my other really close friends, because I kind of hadn't been spending any time with them, even though they were like brothers to me. I just consumed my time with this relationship with this girl in a very unhealthy way, and it created conflict to where people were coming to me, and eventually it came to a head a few weeks later, and it turns out everything that they had been saying, everything they had been warning about, everything they were concerned about, it was all valid. Right? I had been lied to, There had been activities going on behind my back that were damaging to me, damaging to my relationship with my family, that hurt my relationship with my friends and other people. And please hear me, like, it's high school, okay? So, like, the end of a high school relationship is not the end of the world. I get that. But the pain was still real. The anger and the frustration was still real, right? The conflict was still real. And I was angry. I was angry and bitter at the world. I was angry with myself. And the truth is, that's what happens when we don't deal with conflict or pretend that it doesn't exist. Unresolved conflict doesn't usually go away on its own. It doesn't usually just take care of itself. In fact, often unresolved conflict can be incredibly destructive to the relationships that I believe God has made available to us in our family contexts, in the relationships that we enjoy with those closest to us, biological, and sometimes involving those who aren't necessarily biological. They're like moms and dads to us. We're like sons and daughters to them. We're like sisters. We're like brothers because our relationship is so close. And the scriptures actually speak to this, about how to handle conflict well, how to fight fair, how to do this in a healthy way. This is habit number 3, fighting fair. And as we delve a little bit deeper into the book of Proverbs, as written by King Solomon, who certainly had his issues as well, he was gifted by God with incredible wisdom, and some of that wisdom is how to handle conflict. So, in previous messages, we've been in chapters 1 and chapters 2. Now we're going to skip ahead to chapter 13 and begin in verse 1. And again, it has this familial type language of like parents with children, right? We get the language here. A wise son heeds his father's instruction, but a mocker does not respond to rebukes. From the fruit of their lips, people enjoy good things, but the unfaithful have an appetite for violence. Those who guard their lips preserve their lives, but those who speak rashly will come to ruin. And it's at this point in the text in the book of Proverbs where a lot of things are spoken or captured that they're actually more comparative in nature. Right? Speaking of one kind of action or behavior leading to some kind of positive result or good outcome, that being compared with a negative action or a negative practice resulting in a more negative result. The emphasis here in these few words of this chapter being on listening and responding and guarding one's lips. These are what's mentioned about dealing with conflict and how to deal with it well. Listening, responding, and how to guard one's lips from rashly speaking out with emotion. Right? And so as we have this main text here, the question we're asking is, what are these healthy practices when facing conflict? And I know it's outside of the box for me. Please don't be discouraged. We've got 4 points this morning. All right? So those of you who are open for 3, sorry, we're going 4. And the first one simply is, when we're dealing with conflict, when we're having conflict in our families, deal with the problem while valuing the person. Deal with the problem while valuing the other person. Again, in healthy families, this is what we should do. And a text that comes to mind here is found in James chapter 1, verses 19 through 20. Right? My brothers, my dear brothers, again, that familial type language. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Go back to our proverb. Look at the correlation between these two texts, right? Wisdom heeds instruction. Wisdom listens. It listens quickly, while those who fail to listen are described as mockers or if you're familiar with the King James translation of the Bible, scorners. Scorners, mockers and scorners. And this is the Hebrew word. Here's your Hebrew teaching for today. The Hebrew word here for scorners and mockers is lutes. And it carries with it this sense of pride, this sense of arrogance, this sense of ignorance. Friends, when we don't listen to the person that we're having a conflict with, when we're in conflict, when we don't listen to the other person in our family context, this is how we come across as prideful, as arrogant. Even if we're right, even if we disagree. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We can be right, but we can be right in the wrong way. I've heard other notable Christian speakers say it like this: you can be right or you can be happy. Right? Just because we're right doesn't mean the relationship is good. In relationships, in families, when dealing with conflict, it's not just about who wins. Right? It's not just about who's right. It's also about valuing the other person so that you win together. You value them enough to listen. Even if it doesn't change someone's mind, even if it doesn't change the situation, simply in listening to each other, we create trust. We have communicated to our spouse, we have communicated to our child, to our sibling, to those closest to us. I value you as much or more than simply just getting to the end of the conflict or even being right or having my own way. Now, I say that knowing there's still stuff to work through. There's still things that we need to get on the same page with. But we do that in a way that says, you matter to me. You matter to me. We could also say it like this: conflict is not so much us against the other person as it is about us working through a problem to find a solution. When we can get there, when we can practice this, not only do we find ourselves in closer relationship to each other, but we also find better solutions to the problems that we're having, to our conflicts. I wish I could go back and listen to my sister. Like, even if I still hold the same position, like, I wish I could go back and listen to her. I don't know if she would have changed my mind, but I wish I could go back and at least listen. I wish I could go back and sit down and really have a meaningful conversation with my youth pastor and with my dad, instead of just being so dismissive. Because even if I still disagreed, I would have strengthened that relationship instead of damaging it the way that I did. Instead of saying, I don't care what you have to say. Listen. Listening values the other person, even though you're having conflict. We need to deal with conflict while valuing the other person. Secondly, okay, that's number one. Secondly, when it comes to fighting fair, when it comes to healthy practices when dealing with conflict, it looks like considering the needs of the other person in the conflict. Right? Consider the needs of the other person. If you look at our text, it warns us against approaching things too quickly. It warns us against rashness, about giving things more thought before we actually deal with them. It's the opposite of guarding our lips. It's speaking too quickly. It's speaking without thinking things through, without thinking of the other person and what they might need in order to deal with the conflict well. And honestly, it makes me think of the words of the Apostle Paul to the Philippian church in Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 to 4. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness or compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded. Having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but also to the interest of others. So what does that look like? I hope we see the same thread in this second point that we saw in the first, of valuing the other person. To value the other person, we also have to consider their needs. Consider their needs. Let me explain. In a relationship, a wife and a husband, right? In, a parent and a child, in siblings, parents with grandparents, whatever, there's usually two kinds of people when it comes to conflict. I don't know why. We find each other. This is weird. We just find each other. And one is usually an aggressor. One is a pusher. One is an attacker. When there's a problem, they want to deal with it now. They can't set it off till later because it just eats at them. It just drives them nuts. They got to solve it. They got to find the solution. You know what I'm talking about? How many of you, that's how you would identify? I have to deal with it now. I can't set it. Anybody, where's your hand? Put your hands up, right? Where are you at, okay? Right? Look around, see who we all are, right? You got to deal with it. And for whatever reason, we're really good at finding close relationships or being married to or having a sibling or something like that who is the opposite, right? We're the withdrawers. If there's a problem, we want to hide. We just want to go find a dark spot somewhere, leave us alone for a bit. It's not that we don't want to deal with it, we just don't want to deal with it now. We got to think, we got to process. We got to take a beat. Where are you at? Where are my withdrawers? Where are you? Okay, right? Put your hand up. It's okay. Some of you are withdrawing right now, right? Okay? It's okay. Be proud, right? And this is where we've got to be careful and consider the other person's needs. If you're a pusher and you are married to a withdrawer, or you have a sibling who's a withdrawer, you've got to give them space. You can't just push and push and push because it's going to create more conflict. And I know it's going to be hard. But you got to say, okay, I know right now is not a good time. But when is a good time? When can we talk about this? And if they say, I'm not sure, let it be. Please, just let it be. Ask them a little bit later. Hey, this is still bothering me. Can we talk about this? When would be a good time to talk about that? And if you're a withdrawer, you've got to answer that question. You've got to figure out when would be a good time, because the other person, it's driving them nuts. It's killing them on the inside. They're like, I don't know how to function. They don't know how to move on. They don't. They have to deal with it. So you can't just leave them hanging. Because remember, unresolved conflict almost never works itself out. Often it gets worse. So you got to communicate when is a good time to deal with the conflict that you're having. That's what considering the other's needs looks like. Now, what if perchance you're both withdrawers, right? What if neither of you likes dealing with conflict and you just pretend it doesn't exist and you live in this fantasy land, right? Okay? What you got to be careful of is not dealing with the problem. You've got to deal with it. You can't just not deal with it, again, because it's going to show up later and it's going to show up worse. All right? I had a good friend of mine say you can either pay now or pay later, and when you pay later, it's going to be worse. Right? The other problem is when two pushers or two attackers find themselves in close relationship with one another, and there's a problem, and what your tendency is, or what our tendency is to make decisions too quickly, to attack the problem too quickly. And when we do that, we can end in poor solutions that make the problem worse, that make the conflict worse. And so consider the needs of one another when you're dealing with that conflict. I would also go on to say that dealing with conflict and putting the needs of the other person first is also about like creating a safe environment, creating a healthy environment for that working out of that conflict to take place in, where you're not distracted by texting on your phone, or the kids aren't running around screaming and you've got to deal with all of that, and you're trying to have a conversation, a meaningful conversation with all this other stuff going on, right? You don't hash it out while other people are present, like, because that can make us feel like, oh, everybody's watching me and looking at me, and then it's not a good practice. So get rid of the distractions and give the other person your full attention, right? And then don't go try to find a solution before the solution, right? Don't be going talking to other couples and other family members, and well, so and so thinks this, and so is on my side, and that's bad. That's called triangulation. Okay, just don't do that, right? Unless you guys together decide maybe we should talk to a couple that's a little bit further along than us, and maybe could give us some insight for how to handle this situation. If you give each other permission, then it's okay, right? But don't compare yourself to other couples or other close relationships, whatever that is. Make sure you're dealing with it together and the other person has your full attention. Honestly, I wish I did better at this. Okay, so as your pastor, please hear me. As a husband and a father, please hear me. If you find yourself and each other struggling from time to time in handling conflicts well, remember your goal isn't always perfection so much as it is progress. What can you do in this situation that you did differently last time? Like that you can do differently than last time. We all have room to grow. And so it's important to acknowledge and give yourself grace and give each other grace and realize you're not going to get this right every time. It's not going to happen. Give your spouse, give your child, give your sibling, your family member grace in those moments, and ask forgiveness when you don't do it well. And this is super important. Don't make excuses. Well, if you would have done this, don't play the blame game. It's your fault. You said this, that set me off. Don't do that. Own your ways of handling conflict poorly. Learn to say, I'm sorry. Learn to say, I was wrong. Learn to say, I wish we could do that over again because this is how I would have done it. Take ownership. When you're wrong, consider the needs of others by acknowledging it. Because that communicates trust. That communicates value, and it builds confidence in your relationship and how you feel towards the other person and how the other person feels towards you. Some of the most powerful moments in my life, some of those relationship inflection points or moments where real growth takes place have been where I've gone to my spouse, Ashley, and I said, I'm sorry. I did this wrong. Have been where my dad has come to me and said, Tim, I didn't do this well. Or, my mom, I went to her and said, hey, I'm really sorry. That built and strengthened the relationship. Now, that hasn't happened with Ashley yet because she's always right. So when it does happen, I will let you know. We got to have some humor, guys. We can't, we got to, okay? This is what fighting fair looks like. You're valuing the other person. You're considering their needs, right? Go back again to our main text in verse 3 of Proverbs 13. Again, guarding one's lips, not speaking rashly. This has the implication that we're going to keep things in perspective. We're keeping things in perspective. We're not blowing things out of proportion. And sometimes, honestly, that's how conflict occurs. This is how conflict happens. We make a bigger deal out of stuff than we should. Then we're being oversensitive. Sometimes that happens. We make a big deal out of something that isn't that big of a deal. By the way, if somebody in the relationship is being oversensitive, don't tell them they're being oversensitive, okay? That's bad, right? Be patient with them. Let them figure it out for themselves, because chances are, when you're confused because they feel the way they do or they're responding, they're going to figure it out, right? Give them some grace. That's way better, right? And sometimes this conflict or arguments about things, this stuff that we don't keep in perspective, sometimes it's really about things that don't make a difference at all, that don't amount to a hill of beans. They have no eternal perspective or implication or weight on much of anything, including the relationship, and yet there's conflict around them. You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes we create unnecessary conflict out of situations. For instance, if your son or daughter or spouse or brother or sister is telling a story about something that happened the other day, and they get the date wrong, they get the time wrong, they get some of the details wrong, I want you to know this, okay? You don't have to correct them. You don't have to. Like they don't have perfect memory recall. Do you expect them to have perfect memory recall? Because you don't have perfect memory recall. And does it matter to the story? Doesn't the story still have the same point? Do the little details really matter? Because if it doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter. And I can't tell you how many times I've been talking to people, I've asked them a question, they're trying to get to the answer, and they've got to figure out the timeline to the detail, and they're bickering back and forth, and suddenly there's a fight going on, and I'm just like, what's going on here? Because I'm lost, right? How many times have I been guilty of that? How many times has the same thing happened to me where I'm bantering back and forth about meaningless details to where I create conflict? Why does that happen? Because there's this desire to be right. There's this desire to be right. We all want to be right. But what are we learning? We can be right in the wrong way. Seriously, think about some of the dumb stuff we've gotten upset over in the past. You don't believe me? Just think about this. Maybe currently this is an issue. Here's an example, right? One of you is driving and makes a wrong turn. Right? What are you doing? I can't believe you didn't turn there. I said turn. Oh, I thought you meant right. No, it's straight. No, left, whatever. Oh, this is terrible. We're going to have to go around the block? How awful is that? We lost 3 seconds or 5 minutes, or we've got to maybe turn around in somebody's driveway. Full confession time. How many of you have gotten upset because somebody took a wrong turn? My hand's up. Right? Is my wife in here? Don't nod, right? Got upset over meaningless stuff like that. We're going to have to drive around the block. Oh no. Don't you know how hard that is? What a inconvenience. How about this one? I'm notorious for this, right? Putting the milk container back in the fridge when there's not even a half a cup left, right? You just don't want to kill it, right? Oh, I'll leave a little bit for someone else. And it's not even a cup, right? Or you got the chip bag out and you eat all the big chips and then there's just crumbs left in the bottom. Or you got a box of cereal and it's a little bit more than a full bowl, but you should probably kill it anyway. And you're just nah, I'll leave that in the bottom. And the next person goes to get cereal and it's what are you doing, right? How many of you are guilty of that, right? It just, and the other person, they find it and they're what are you doing? Right? They're upset. Why would you put this back? Why? Oh, Ashley, bless her heart. I know what that means now. I've been in the South long enough, right? right? She'll go to get some milk or chips, and the kids will get something, and who ate all the cereal? Who drank all the milk? Why did you put this back in here? And then I think it's really bad when you get to that point of intentionally doing it because you just want to get a rise on the person, right? You know who you are, right? I do it too. I go in and I get something and it's not there or there's not enough left. You couldn't eat one more cookie for real? Like why you got to leave me hanging here? I thought there was a pile of them. And there's one. We get bent out of shape over some of, the stupidest, not me, but we get in fights and arguments and frustrate and hurt people and create conflict over stuff that just doesn't matter. Right? You want to talk about a touchy subject? In premarital counseling, usually I focus on how to handle conflict well and finances. Because I can't tell you how many arguments happen over finances, right? One of us spends money on something, and it was maybe a little bit more expensive at one place than it was at another place, right? And we get all bent out of shape. You spent $2 more on it, Or you spent an extra $5, and we create conflict out of stuff. Listen, if $5 is going to break the bank, it don't matter. You got a real problem, and it's not $5. Okay? Growing up, I loved to buy action figures. My dad couldn't understand for the life of me, right? G.I. Joes, Batman figures. Man, I just spend money on all this kind of stuff. And he'd be like, I don't understand you. Like, you spent like $15 on action figures. You could have got a fishing pole. Like, I don't understand. You spent, $60 on a video game. Like, if you just saved up a couple more months, you could have got a nice hunting rifle, right? And we get on each other because we like different stuff, or we spent more than we think the other person should spend type thing. We do this all the time. And hear me, I think you should budget well. I think you should communicate when you spend. If you're out there buying $400 hunting rifles every week, you have a problem. You need to deal with that. That's a conflict that you need to deal with, okay? But if you get a cup of coffee and there's this huge argument over it, it really doesn't matter. It's not that big of deal. Keep things in perspective when it comes to conflict. If it's got no eternal value, if it doesn't amount to a hill of beans, right? If it's more about being right and things being exactly the way that you want them or remember them, it doesn't really matter. Keep it in its place. Fight fair. Don't let little insignificant things create significant risks in your relationship with your family. Value the other person in the conflict by listening. Right? Think about their needs. Keep perspective. This is how we fight fair. These are healthy practices for working through conflict. And the last one, looking closely at verse 2 again, it says, from the fruit of their lips, people enjoy good things. From the fruit of their lips, people enjoy good things. Again, this is encouragement for using our lips, our speech, in a way to build people up. To speak in ways that are edifying and encouraging. Not trying to attack, manipulate, or control situations if we're in a conflict with one another. And a practice that just goes a long way in helping us do that and fight fair is praying for one another. Praying for one another. Pray for the other person in the relationship. Okay? Now, got to clarify that, got to qualify that a little bit. Okay? If you're praying, Lord, help them get what they deserve, that's not what I'm talking about. Right? If you're praying, Lord, smite them, that's not what I'm talking about. If you're praying, Lord, help them see that I am right, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about praying against them. We're talking about praying for them, seeking and wanting the best for them. What does that look like? I think that looks like praying before the conflict happens. Not just when the conflict occurs. Praying before the conflict happens, seeking their good, calling out to God on behalf of them before the conflict happens, making that a regular practice. For instance, I know that I will have conflict with my children down the road. So I'm praying for them right now. Right? We're gonna get in an argument. Right? They're going to hit 16 and know everything, and I'm going to be, handicapped, and we're going to have to deal with the conflict. So I'm praying for them now. I'm not waiting until the conflict happens. At night when I get up and I got to rock Maya to sleep and, feed her milk and whatever, as I'm rocking her, I'm praying for her. I'm calling out to the Lord on behalf of her. Lord, give her wisdom. Lord, give her insight. Lord, bless her. Help her. When we get in stupid fights, help me understand. Help me listen. Praying for God's blessing in her life. Right? Ashley and I, we're going to have conflicts. She threw a pillow at me one time. No, it wasn't a pillow. It was a paper towel. Paper towel. Whack, right in the head. I deserved it. Okay? I'll be honest. I'll tell you that too. I deserved it. Right? But I'm going to pray for Ashley. And I would say, God, bless her. Bless her, Lord. Help me to understand her. Help me to be on her side. Work in her life. Help me to be the kind of husband that you would want me to be for her. Help me to be the kind of dad that you would want me to be for my children. I think we need to understand this too, friends. When conflict comes, we don't want to see the other person as the opposition. I don't want to see my wife as opposition when there's conflict. I don't want to see my kids as opposition. I don't want to get angry with them. But if I'm angry, if I'm upset, if I'm frustrated, whatever word you want to put there, I want that to be with the situation, not the other person. Because here's the reality. When your family, is the way the Scripture's talking about here, you're on the same team. You're on the same team. They're on your team and you're on their team. And we don't find solutions by blaming and being mad at each other. And, well, you said this or you responded this way, and that made me respond the way that I did. Right? If you would have done things this way, then, I wouldn't have done it that way. Or, just arguing about those things and blaming and being mad at each other. We don't find solutions that way. We find solutions by working together as a team and praying for one another and with one another for wisdom and strength and discernment. And I'm telling you, honestly, it's really hard to be mad at somebody when you're praying for and seeking their best and you're crying out to the Lord on their behalf. It's just hard to be mad at somebody. Not that I'm anybody special. But there are people in my life who have wronged me. And I pray for God's best in their life. I pray for God's blessing in their life, even though I've been hurt. I pray for God's blessing. Just the other day, I experienced hurt, and a few months ago, some conflict, and I'm currently praying for blessing and wisdom and God's best to be poured out in that person's life. And I can't tell you how freeing that is. How freeing that is to genuinely want God's best for people, to be on their side, even though there might be conflict or tension. Families have conflict. They just do. Church families have conflict. They just do. So be a family that prays for each other. And don't wait for the conflict to start, or to start praying when that conflict begins. Pray right now. Pray for those in your family right now. Pray for God's best for them. Because when you do that, you'll find it far more easier to forgive and overlook offenses. And there's a passage in the Bible that has been on my heart lately. You've heard me say it before, but it is to one's glory to overlook an offense. So again, these are just habits, practices, healthy families do that help families out of the book of Proverbs. And let me tell you, the book of Proverbs is more like a general, like, if you do this, then it's likely this is going to happen, right? It's not like a formula like do this and then for sure this is going to be the outcome, right? These are general statements of truth. They're good. And there's lots in here about family dynamics. They're all over. And there's lots of challenges that we face that certainly these are applicable to the situations that happen in our lives. But I would also want to clarify and say this when it comes to conflict. Conflict doesn't always mean you stay in the conflict. Working through conflict doesn't mean you always stay in that conflict. Sometimes conflict is abusive. And I don't mean that flippantly. But seriously, abusive. And you might have to practice these things that I'm talking about from a distance. You might have to find a mediator. You might have to find a counselor. There might have to be some distance in order to work through things. And yet even that can have its challenges. But in general, if we fight fair, right? If we go together, if we put Jesus first, God's going to bless our families. He's going to strengthen our families and give us incredible fortitude, and we'll be prepared to walk through even the darkest of valleys.